Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending where you're joining us from. Dear colleagues, guests, and panelists, welcome to the second online panel discussion under the Higher Colleges of Technology Future Readiness Initiative. My name is Marko Savic, and as a member of the HCT Strategy and Future team, I'll be moderating today's session. In light of increasingly volatile and uncertain external business conditions faced by all sectors, HCT made the decision 2 years ago to ensure future foresight capabilities are integral to its strategy development process. To this end, HCT's current Future Readiness Initiative is the latest application of these capabilities aimed to capitalizing on future opportunities presented by current trends whilst mitigating future threats. This webinar is the opportunity to hear from panelists at the forefront of those future trends. So since the dawn of the fourth industrial revolution, disruptive technologies and other interconnected trends are quickly transforming the way we live and work. That includes shifts in occupational structures and change in skills demand at a faster pace than ever before. At the same time, people live and work longer and are expected to upgrade or shift their careers much more frequently. An extensive transformation of the global socio-economic ecosystem is forcing higher education to reconsider traditional models in order to respond and address emerging expectations, bringing agility in the focus of all innovative activities. Micro-credentials, comprehensive learner records, and e-portfolios are just some of the new forms of competency-based digital learning services or products supporting interoperability between worlds of education and work, enabling and verifying job readiness, and bridging the growing disconnection between employers' needs and graduates' skills. This panel, titled Boosting Higher Education Agility, Next Generation of Learning Services, aims to explore where universities are today. Are they ready to change and become much more agile? And if so, how the next generation of the learning services enabling their survival would look like? So it is my honor today to introduce distinguished international panelists to join me. Dr. Jihad Mohaidat, HCT Vice President, Educational Technology from UAE. Welcome, Dr. Jihad.
Thank you, Marko. Pleasure to be here.
Professor Chris Pilgrim, Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academic, Swinburne University of Technology from Australia.
Thanks, Marko. Looking forward to the panel.
Mark Leuba, Vice President, Product Management, IMS Global, USA.
Thank you, Marko. It's a pleasure to be here.
Sultan Al Haji, President, Alliance Francaise, Abu Dhabi, and former Vice President, Total E&P, UAE.
Thank you, Marko. Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
And Roland Hancock, Partner, PwC, Middle East, UAE.
Good morning, Marko. Good morning, everybody. Thanks very much for the invitation. Looking forward to the discussion.
You can find panelists' bios linked to this session invite. The mix of their backgrounds, from academic, strategic to employment, tends to help us all to get better understanding of the complexity of the topics and different perspectives of the futures we may striving towards. In order to make discussion more interactive and dynamic, please excuse me for from now on to skipping the formal etiquette and using just your first names. Would you mind? Okay. And also, due to the limited time, please excuse me for safeguarding the duration of each discussion. So before we start, I would like to provide brief information regarding today's session. Discussion will last about an hour and a half. An additional 10 to 15 minutes will be dedicated to answering your questions. Please address them to the Q&A section only and use chat only for chat, as we will not be able to capture your questions there. I hope that you will understand that. So now, to warm up our international audience, let me launch our first poll. So the question we have is, what is the key driver behind emerging trend of the new or next generation learning services? I would like to ask you to choose one of the answers as per your understanding, and we would have about a minute to vote. Ten more seconds. Please, if you didn't vote, please vote. Okay, as you can see, the winner is most of above. There are different scopes on this: digitization of learning delivery, boosting employability, agilizing higher education. It seems that no one voted for optimizing service costs, and personalization is one more point also. Yes, thank you for chat warning that I didn't share the results. Yes, now you can see it, I hope. So majority of you said most of above, and I really appreciate this answer. But now I would like to ask our panelists to respond to a similar question from their perspective. So for the panelists, the question is, what are the key drivers behind the emerging trend to shorten learning cycles and redefine the approach towards flexible learning pathways? And how do you see micro-credentials, comprehensive learner records, and e-portfolios supporting them? So let's start from Chris. Chris, floor is yours, please.
Yeah, thanks, Marko, and a great question. Look, I think over the past couple of years, we've seen the world of work really transform. The nature of jobs and tasks and skills have rapidly changed in response to technology, globalization, and other sorts of economic developments. And these have impacted the traditional forms of education and training. And now we see employers and governments and students really demanding new opportunities, such as the micro-credentials. And I think there's three drivers that have led to the demand for micro-credentials. First of all, there's the changing nature of employment, as I mentioned, and work and jobs due to technology change. And we've seen that automation is displacing and disrupting many traditional jobs with and changing the dynamic really between knowledge and skills and work and tasks and roles. And many industries, the most in-demand occupations now just didn't exist 10 years ago. And we also know that careers are no longer linear. So we will see that graduates will change employers. I think the statistic is 17 times across 5 careers over their working lives. And we see that qualifications, traditional qualifications and credentials have a shorter shelf life. We also see that learners are changing their expectations. No longer is learning a linear experience. Instead, it's more of a complex network of learning opportunities, mixing between work and learning and work and learning. Students are now demanding flexible and personalised and just for me learning experiences with variable start and end points that really integrate into their lives and their work. And they enter into learning experiences to fulfill particular purposes that meet their needs at a particular time. And then finally, I think there's a lot of questions about the traditional types of qualifications. So we see employers questioning the value of traditional university credentials and considering other evidence for employment and promotion decisions. And we see that traditional university credentials also are lacking in a way that they don't explicitly evidence the attainment of those professional skills that employers are after. So we see that micro-credentials are coming along at a point in time to fill this gap, to allow the credentials to recognise professional skills and to allow greater student flexibility.
Thank you, Chris. Cut. Can you please unmute yourself?
Thank you, Marko. Probably I want to add also another similar 3 reasons to what Chris has stated. Some of them would be probably overlapping with what he said. Nonetheless, I will probably do it in a different language. So one of the key reasons is, okay, and because of the impact of technology, things are getting very complex. So in other words, in the beginning, we used to have, let's say, a bachelor degree in planning engineering, whatever planning is. Then it turns out that, okay, that's not sufficient enough to be dedicated for a job. Then it came about in due time specializations, electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, civil engineering, etc. Then it became even more complex. So even if you go to very specific discipline, you would still have to go to a subspecialty. So if you go, for example, to electrical engineering, then you have to do either electronics, or you do computers, or you do power, etc. Then it becomes more complex. So what I'm trying to hint is that the driver for specific jobs or specific skill is driving the education toward a very narrow requests from the industry, driven by automation, driven by unprecedented change in technology, all that. So we start to be narrowing now to very specific skill demand from the industry. That is one area. In that case, because of the issues, just exactly what Chris mentioned, for example, there is no evidence in the traditional education. Employers start asking, look, I'm no longer interested in your academic degree. Show me how to do things. So in other words, the employers now, they started to push away from recognizing or being interested in an academic degree that you have. If you are able to demonstrate that you are able to do the job, by all means. And in that case, we will recognize your ability and your salary scale and your occupation, depending on how much do you know in that particular skill. The bottom line is, are you able to deliver the job for the employer? Okay, that's the second. The third thing is, okay, if you look at the programs today, okay, whether it is a undergrad degree or more, for example, you're looking at 4 years on average to complete a degree. 4 years on average to complete a degree, that became too long for a job cycle. Okay, things are changing much faster. By the time you start in a degree program of 4 years, for example, and targeting a specific job in those 4 years, by the time you finish, the job that you were targeting initially has already, okay, probably changed, and what have you done in the first 3 years might not be much more meaningful to what you want to do, and the requirements of the employer have changed. So it's now start to be not really making much of a sense to indulge yourself as a learner in a 4-year program when you have no guarantee that whatever skill you're going to be end up with at the end of the 4 years is going to be there required as it was. Okay, so from that perspective, a request for a much more dynamic approach to skill acquiring is essential. And I believe micro-credentials would, at this stage, provide the mechanism to do that, where you actually want to achieve the specific skill that is required by the industry. So these complications became the key driver that the total business model of higher education has to change. And I believe micro-credentialing now is probably paving the way for a way to do things. And I believe most of the institutions, a lot of it started doing it. Some of it, however, they're doing it from an informal perspective, more of a lifelong learning approach. But I would expect it in the coming few years to be the mainstream of how we do offer skills to potential learners.
Thank you, Jihad. Mark.
I agree with Chris and with Jihad, certainly. And I'd like to draw out just 3 elements of what has been said, but I'll put a point on it that relates to what IMS Global provides. First is this concept of lifelong learning, and the fact that the traditional student in college is changing to one that is often an adult that is working full-time and going to school part-time perhaps. And this concept of a durable, lifelong learning record becomes more important, so that that individual can take with them evidence of their learning and their credentials over time and be able to present that to others in search of a job or educational advancement. So the importance of a lifelong learning record becomes to the fore. Secondly, and we've already talked about skills demonstration and the ability to have evidence that can be contained within these learning records and again shared. And that evidence could be a work product that the learner has created to demonstrate a particular skill, and in any variety of different electronic, often elements of evidence. And then finally, we've talked about the changing of the formal education structure and the fact that employers now are no longer requiring often a college degree as a requirement to qualify for a position. So learning outside of the classroom becomes increasingly important, and which again ties back into evidence, the ability to demonstrate and provide evidence of that learning to a prospective employer. And then also finally, this durable lifelong learning record that can in fact be an asset that the individual can take with them and include in a digital wallet, for example. So all of these different factors are kind of pointing to the essential nature of these learning records.
Thank you, Mark. Sultan.
Thank you, Mark. I think I will not say otherwise than what my colleagues have said already, from Professor Chris to Jihad and to Mark. But what I'd like to add that the education institution have started a long time ago, as we know it today, 200 more or less years ago, with the records, which is proven records to itself. There is certain information and knowledge we should acquire before we become productive in our life. And today we are faced with a challenge I don't think is any other different challenge than when we moved from a steam engine to industrial revolution with same challenges. People have lost their jobs in coal mining industries, for example. Today we're losing jobs because of the new technology, but the basic information knowledge is needed then, needed now. I think if we just simplify it, because we need to employ a lot of our students today, I can say that STEM education is still needed. Basic mathematics, calculus, physics, biology, chemistry, knowledge of arts, knowledge of music, all needed. I don't think Elon Musk will be what he is without having accumulated all these knowledges. So let's not kid ourselves that we should be driven because of the employment situation today. And today, with a pandemic we have, for example, I don't think we can manage ourselves if we could not have the STEM along with something called empathy. we're overlooking certain things in human education, which we today are driven by blockchains and by digitalization and going away from the basics knowledge is what I said. I mean, today, if the kids are spending too much time with TV and with these Xboxes, where they will learn the empathy, where they will learn to be focused, to be consistent on any projects, where they will learn to be sharing this team building issues. When they come to real life, they have to have this. In the old days, we used to have our fathers and grandfathers. They have time for us to teach us these things, the basic elements. Today, I think the role shifted. I think it is education institution who have a group of people together at a certain time, certain moment. They have to do this role, which I think now it's a new role for the education system to be really the big fathers or the father's role, in other words. Second thing, I myself challenged many challenges in my industry as an oil company, but I can tell you the truth, some of the solutions I have found to very difficult engineering problems, it came out of religion, out of my understanding of art and music. And I mean, the time is not there to tell you about these things, but I tell you, without having these kind of competencies, understanding, at least appreciating this, I will not be able to what I am today. So from my point of view, I think the education institution should not move from its principal core business of educating the basic techniques, either the core, the hard cores. Today, of course, we change the language. We need the coding is a very good, as Jihad have said, automation, to do automation, but also to be innovative, like Elon Musk or Steve Jobs or somebody else. We need other elements in life, and we should not we're sacrificing many things in our life. I mean, you're witness, Jihad, in this education system, which we have in the Arab world, because we're moving to our STEM knowledge, we have neglected the art, the music, and the sports. And this is a shame, really, because when you grow up, you don't have this, you cannot appreciate the life. So from my point of view, there should be some kind of balance between both, because as an employer, I need somebody who can be creative, who can be a team builder, a team player, who can be an initiator of things, who can be cooperative with other people, understand their empathy and be sympathized with other people. Otherwise, he will not be able to manage his team properly, and who have a potential. I think the basic problem we have when we receive students to the college, we should do like any other organization do, we should recruit. And it means that we should not put them through digitalization format and compliances with certain papers. We should have one-to-one, and the reason to do that, to bring the best out of them, not to shove them through careers which they might not be as strong as possible, because each one of us have a certain talents. So we should invest on their talents. And I mean, question I used to ask when I employ somebody, one of my question was that, what are your hobbies? Because that's the potential I'm looking for to go forward with my mission as a company, either to cut cost or to be innovative in my engineering. So my message is STEM, coding is very good, but as well as soft skills is very important. They should be taught, because nobody is doing that. And I mean, soon you will have a bunch of people who are attached to blockchains and the Krypton, and nobody will invent or will look after the hardcore businesses here. Thank you.
Thank you, Sultan. Roland, what's your stance?
Yeah, thanks. And good morning, everybody. Thanks again for the invitation to come and speak and join this fantastic panel. It's a great question. I really wanted to participate in the poll. I would have pressed, I think, the agilizing of HE operating models, but I realized that it's actually bigger than that. This is nothing short of agilizing, is that the word you've used? Higher education in general. So this is a fundamental change to higher education we're talking about. I think there's a risk, and perhaps it's a perception risk that Sultan just highlighted. This being the shortening of learning. And I think that's a risk we need to avoid. So identify and recognize learning and the units of learning as they're undertaken. So two things I think I wanted to bring up. First is that shortening cannot lead to a lack of depth or specialization, and that needs to be avoided. there is a risk of superficiality if this is just about stacking low-level qualifications on top of each other until they reach one high-level qualification. And we need to make sure that we support deep learning and specialization. The second is that micro-credentials are as valuable as the trust we have in them. And no credential is any good unless you believe in the entity that provides it. And if you think about the decision makers who are looking at credentials, employers, individuals, parents, it's highly linked to the entity providing that credential. If you think about Google University, do you trust it? It's not recognized, it's not accredited, it's not academically seen globally as a world-leading academic institution, but the brand and the technology and the recognition for Google is such that it allows for us to believe that the quality of what's delivered there is sufficient to credentialize whoever's been through it. And I think therefore any micro-credential, it has to be valid in terms of the trust we have in it. So very important for us to think about whether it's professional training certificates, university micro-credentials, or any other certification for an individual, that the provider of that credential is of sufficient quality for that to matter. So I think that's another area I just wanted to bring up for the discussion. Lastly, I think there is something very interesting here around the challenge for regulators to try and keep up with micro-credentials. Regulators already struggle to keep up with the changing nature of higher education and degrees, with technology advancements moving as quickly as they are. When we start talking about micro-credentials, it's very, very difficult for any regulator to be able to put the right kind of parameters around micro-credentials for them to be validated at a national level. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Perhaps we don't need them. Perhaps user recognition is sufficient. Perhaps LinkedIn likes or views are sufficient. But this is a difficult area, and it's changing so fast that international calibration of the types of credentials that we have is going to be harder and harder as time goes on. So it's something to be aware of, because while we all understand what a degree is, do we all understand what the micro-credentials mean? And that's where we'll come into being. So there is still a very important place for deep specialized knowledge. It's great to have the flexibility of smaller micro-credentials, but let's be ready to understand where they come from and how useful they are.
Thank you, Roland. Really, you gave an excellent introduction to the next question, but I would like to ask all of the panelists, would you like to reflect to any of the comments of your colleagues before we turn to the next question?
Yes, sorry, it's true. Thank you, Marko. I just want to come back to Sultan's focus on empathy and the knowledge, okay? I definitely correlate with you 100%. That is definitely needed if you want to really create a human being, okay, that is capable of interacting with all sorts of issues and problems around them. Nonetheless, so I just want to go back to also the concept of academic institutions. Usually when they post in their, let's say, goals is creating a well-rounded profile of a graduate, okay? And with that, with a well-rounded profile, it means with all these requirements of teamwork, problem solving, all these specific soft skills, okay? Now, one of the areas we talk about is a skill, and the other one is more or less like a competency. When you augment a skill with the knowledge, which is math and physics that makes the people like Elon Musk and others, you create a competency. So basically, okay, in order for a person to be competent in an area, in a specific area, while they're having the skill, they have also to show the knowledge part in order to be competent. And the discussion, okay, where it's be driving is more of like, there must be a change in the business model of how higher education is being offered, the traditional way of doing it versus a micro-credentialing approach. A micro-credentialing approach will not deprive people, or is not supposed to deprive learners, sorry, from the empathy skills, the soft skills and all that. That's definitely needed. However, okay, this is being imposed, okay, in order for you to be efficient as a higher education industry. Just like any other industry, you have to be efficient and you have to be able to deliver, and you have to cope up with the augmentation of change, because technology improvement will not wait for you. Given the fact that changing academics as it runs today is very difficult to change, okay, as per the regulations, as Ronald refers to accreditation and all these issues, taking a different business model on micro-credentialing and stackability, if needed, of records, etc., to achieve a bigger credential, for example, that is what we focusing on here as a more agile approach to offering higher education. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Would anyone else want to reflect? Mark?
I totally think this is the greatest panel that I've participated in a long time. These are big issues for sure, and the importance of reputation is essential. You know, and as Sultan and Jihad were saying, it all goes down to humanity at the end of the day. So it's a very fascinating subject that we're discussing, the application of technology in order to draw out some important human capabilities. So it's that's my only comment, Marko.
Thank you, Mark. And we are shifting actually now to the next question, which tends to give some responses to some topics which have been risen. Roland mentioned that we have to have a trust in a provider. Sultan mentioned that really different scopes of learning matter as we are complicating a system which would not consist of the academic providers only anymore. And as it is very obvious that academic providers are losing their monopoly, the question would be, what is the importance and what are the major challenges in setting a harmonized framework or standards between diverse learning providers and credentialing models from one, and governments, policymakers, and employers from the other side? And I would like to start from Mark, because this is one of the key topics of his work.
Thank you. You know, the term standards is unfortunate in some respects because it means so many different things. It can have such a broad implication. I'd like to briefly just talk about what IMS Global does. We're an organization of members, 570 or so institutions, colleges, school districts, and technology companies that come together to develop interoperability standards for the exchange of learning data. So that we're exclusively focused on teaching and learning and managing and exchanging data related to that. We publish, for example, the Open Badge Standard, which is worldwide the de facto standard for micro-credentials, for example. We also have a new lifelong learning record called the Comprehensive Learning Record. And so I'd welcome your participants to research that. But as far as the challenges go, we as an organization have been in existence for about 20 years now and have had numerous cycles of bringing important standards into the market. And there's basically three stages and that relate very effectively, I think, to what we're seeing here with micro-credentials and our discussion today. You know, the first is primarily awareness. And this program today is an important contributor to that. The availability of various tools that can be used to promote agility in higher education, and that can promote a really meaningful collaboration between employers and educators. The fact that those standards are actually available for use and adoption. That's a very important piece of information. So the awareness factor is critically important. And then secondly, commitment, organizational commitment to actually change, to do something like adopt a particular standard, for example, or a particular modality for capturing learning records. That commitment, of course, is challenged right now in the world we live in today with the pandemic and lots of very important, in some cases, life-threatening priorities. So granted, these records and the discussion we're having today may not be the most important subject for all of us, but as a point of time, as we collectively move away from these current challenges, the focus on the ability for the working population and the student population to find the right level and to find their best career opportunity, that will resurface as a critically important and essential thing, and education agility is critical to that. So the commitment stage is very important for organizations that believe this is strategically valuable, and there are many there. There are early movers that have embraced these types of approaches. They will be able to take advantage of the opportunities more quickly. And then finally is the execution itself, that the ability to actually develop the plans and develop, in some cases, software or buy software and organize your programs to achieve these new ways of working. The execution, one piece of advice that I might offer based on our experience thus far with rolling out standards and adopting those, the execution should really start small. And it's one common challenge and an issue is often overreach, where it's conceived on paper that a particular process down to the level of perfection, and things don't always work as planned. So it's far better with these nascent programs and in some cases nascent technology to start small, start with pilot and prototype plans, start locally, start with existing relationships between your education organization and employers, and build on those relationships and those mutual goals, so that you can mutually identify the best path forward. And then finally, I wanted to get back to this question of standards and the confusing nature of that sometimes. There are basically different levels of standards. We have technical standards that are similar to what we are using right now. We're benefiting from a technical standard that allows us all to connect together, and it's changed the world as a result of some simple technical standards. Then there's also data interoperability. That's the next level where you and I can exchange information. Not only can we connect, but we can exchange information that has value. And then lastly, and most problematically for this discussion, is this question of semantic interoperability and semantic standards. And that's what I think we're talking about when we are relating to being able to trust skills, being able to understand what this competency actually means to me, and what vehicles can we as a group envision and implement that will allow this mutual understanding in a way that is durable and that can be recognized and scaled. And there are examples of that in our society today, and education probably needs to move closer to more modern types of technology that would allow for these reputation-based systems to help our goals as we've described them.
Thank you, Mark. Chris, can you reflect on this, please?
Yeah, look, thank you. And, I think Mark has really well laid out some of those challenges that how we move towards agreement on models and standards. And for me, one of the blockers is terminology and definitions, and at the starting point. And I'd just like to reflect on our experience at Swinburne University. So we're a medium-sized university in Australia, around about 50,000 students, covering bachelor degrees, vocational diplomas through to PhDs. In the past 18 months, we've created a micro qualification framework in order to respond to the need for micro credentials and micro qualifications. And we spent quite a lot of time working through definitions and trying to understand what are the terms that would be understood by students, employers, governments, and other universities. And there is furious debate in the Australian sector about what the terminology should be. So I have little confidence that we'll be able to move to standards if we can't agree on terminology. Our platform, our framework is based on micro units, and that's a terminology that we're starting to use. So we've created these shorter form credentials, and we've accredited them through our academic board. And these micro units have learning outcomes, and they have assessment that can prove that a student has demonstrated the attainment of learning outcomes, and they have a quality assurance overlay that really does provide the basis for academic credit back into traditional degrees. And these micro units provide students with discipline-specific skills and knowledge, and then the application of those skills and knowledge into contexts. So to Jihad's point, it goes beyond just a skill to a capability and a competency. And they're different from commercial short courses, which don't really have this academic status. And these micro units stack up into micro qualifications, which can then move back into traditional qualifications. However, our Swinburne micro units and micro qualifications are not nationally recognised. There is no transferability of attainment and no guarantee that credit will go outside of our own institution. So we know we need standards, and our Australian government is concerned about the rise of micro units and micro credentials, and the plethora of models that are being introduced across the sector. But we have tension between governments and national accrediting bodies and universities and employers. We see governments wishing to use micro credentials to solve national workforce challenges. But to Roland's point, the volume of learning just isn't there to be able to use them really for high-level capabilities that can be relied on for employment decisions. Providers such as my own university, we're also a little bit dubious about standards because that will inhibit innovation. It'll inhibit how we can personalise micro-credentials and micro-units to particular student cohorts. And we do understand that employers are struggling with that recognition and trust, and students are confused with what is a complex marketplace of different sorts of credentials. So the challenges are profound, I think, and there's no clear way, I think, to a harmonised platform. Hence, these discussions are so important. Thanks, Marko.
Thank you, Chris. Jihad, can you reflect on HCT experience? Please unmute.
I believe the issues that Mark and Chris have listed are definitely in our minds when we start to think and put together some sort of a plan for how do we want to approach micro-credentialing at HCT. Now, what I would probably emphasize here, it is the micro-credentialing is an inevitable approach. Okay, it's gonna happen, and it's gonna be a requirement down the road. So you need to prepare as you go. So I do appreciate very much the IMS work, for example, in terms of putting the standards, putting the best practices. How is this happening? How would you provide data for the decision maker? That's beautiful to do. That's beautiful to do, and I appreciate also the experience that Chris went through at the Australian level and how the challenges with the government. Now, and I And this is just emphasizing what we have been thinking here at HCT. Now, the level of issues, okay, and the amount of change that needs to be brought up to the system is humongous. Okay, for example, okay, you're going to be moving from a standard process study program into some sort of a stackability approach. That's not existing almost on academic institutions globally. You're going to be removing the duration limit on a program. Okay, so in other words, today you would have, okay, a 4-year tight program for a degree. That has to be removed. That when you remove that and you leave it as when the learner is willing to finish that stackable requirement, that will put a huge pressure on how would you be funded if the government is funding you. In particular, just example in our case, in HCT, where are fully government funded. When you have the platform open, you finish whenever you want to finish. Okay, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, 10 years, it's up to you. Whenever you are interested to acquire that credential. The third thing, the micro-credentialing by nature would require a personalization. So in other words, technology will come into effect. You do it however you like to do it, the way you like to do it, whenever you like to do it. So it is more of now we're pushing technology to be more of the bigger player, okay, rather than the institution itself, okay. That will also impose different requirements on the institution. What type of faculty is required, what more infrastructure is required, etc. and all that. So a whole change in culture is needed. We're coming into it with no previous experience, with no one who actually do it full-fledged. So that kind of data requirements and doing it step by step, as Mark, for example, said, start with a small program, okay? Start with a university-based kind of credential that's not recognized yet. This whole thing will bring a humongous challenge to the government. How would they quality control, particularly through their accreditation bodies? How do they do the funding models? How do they do the occupational structures? All these, okay, will create a big gap between, okay, academic institutions and the government. Nonetheless, here is the issue. Technology will not wait. Automation will not wait. It is moving regardless whether you are able to solve those issues or not. You're going to be finding yourself, okay, technology is pushing you. You liked it or not, okay? So you'll find yourself actually at one point in time, you don't know what to do. So, and if we are not able through standards or others, for example, to design a very dynamic model, we, in a few years down the road, we will probably find it a chaotic situation. On the employer side, and coming to Sultan, for example, in particular, okay, I believe the game will change. In the sense, today, for example, universities, they do a lot of effort in industry-university relationship and how they design their programs to meet the industry requirements or meet the demand. I believe the game will be flipped, okay? In other words, there might not need to be much interaction between the university or the provider and the industry. It's going to be flipped to the learner-industry cooperation rather than the university. So the learner will actually be more in touch with the industry to know what are the requirements for a job, okay? And will actually focus his or her attention to where and who is offering those skills that's required by a specific job in the industry and go and acquire them. A key problem of recognition and putting a standard for example, micro-credentialing by nature would require a cross-institutional offering, okay? You might have a very specific micro-credential that requires, that encompasses, let's say, 5 skills. You don't have to have those 5 skills or competencies acquired from a given institution. You might collect it from different institutions, okay? So how would you actually put that platform of, okay, recognition between different institutions? Back to Roland, for example, let's say statement of somebody's getting a skill from Google University. How would I recognize that? How would that play a role, for example, with the accreditation bodies? Okay, so given the complexity, okay, I believe in order to able to catch that there have to be a much more engagement with the industry, with the let's say the government from one side, to make sure that is as dynamic as the industry itself.
Thank you, Jihad. And we are getting actually now to the next question, which is actually employer's perspective. So what would be the most suitable partnership model with learning providers in order to leverage best from worlds of education and work? And this question is particularly targeting Roland first and Sultan after, as they have experience from the other side. So Roland, please.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Marko. So I'm fortunate to both work within the education sector, but also I'm part of a large graduate employer regionally and globally. So let me just speak from the perspective of PwC as an employer, as a graduate recruiter, and as a part of industry. We are evolving our ability to recruit on the basis of capability rather than on the basis of degree profile. So you know, historically, we and many other firms have taken graduates from the highest possible ranked universities we could, and that's because those universities either select the brightest or are able to prepare their graduates the best for the workplace. Actually, the world has moved on from that, and lots of universities are doing a fantastic job of preparing their students for the workplace, and we've adjusted accordingly. We now moved in many parts of the world to anonymous psychometric aptitude and capabilities assessments in order to filter the graduate applications for PwC. That means moving away from, I think, what we would perhaps previously guilty of, which was some subjectivity around social background, around type of degree, perhaps something around gender and race, and really to focus now on capabilities. That means we are trying hard to look beyond the headline degree into experience, into skills, and into the capabilities of the people that we hire. But we're still human, and we still look for people who tick a lot of boxes, and we are looking for rounded individuals, and we do want reassurance of the quality of their credentials. I think Mark said that employers are confused, and he's right. You know, we don't know how to look at micro-credentials. I've got no idea which micro-credentials are going to tell me more about an individual over others. So we do rely on what we can recognize and what we can grasp. Assessment centers that we run focus very hard on the aptitudes of the candidates. And we have moved somewhat in the way that we deliver our recruitment and training. So for example, in the UK, we have a program called the Flying Start program, where you can join PwC straight from school. And what we'll do is we'll let you work 6 months of the year with PwC, and 6 months of the year you'll be with Northampton University doing part of your degree program. That means after 4 or 5 years, you will have 4 or 5 years of experience and a degree that's gone hand in hand, either around accounting or business. And that's a fantastic way to develop both work critical skills and the academic rigor that we recognize and believe in. We also run apprenticeships in the UK, and we run apprenticeships from school level through to the equivalent of a master's degree in the UK. So you can actually become a professional apprentice with both PwC and a number of other firms that we've set this up for, where upon leaving school, if you're not ready to go into university or not ready to commit to a degree, actually your learning will go up level by level. That will be credentialized as you go at the certificate and diploma levels into the degree and into the higher learning credentials as you pursue your career. And that's something that you can get on and off from. And perhaps, you know, that was an early version of micro-credentialing, but we're now adding digital badges to that. We now have our branding against those. think we probably overextend my time already, but what I'm saying is that there is a lot of flexibility in the partnerships between employers and educators now. And I think, you know, what we're seeing is that there are many formats for this that are multiplying over time with micro-credentials.
Thank you, Roland. Sultan, what would your practice in industry say about this topic?
Thank you, Malcolm. I think I will not differ too much from Roland what you have said. That we have similar experiences. In other words, I mean, we have two types of employees. We have people who are what we call expertise in their field, and they don't have the specific qualifications per se, or degree from university. And then we have the managerial line, which we really, again, come back to Roland. We are subjective a bit to know their background, their experiences, their university, and so forth, so on and so on. To give you an example, what Roland have said also a long time ago when I was in Total, 14, I think. Yeah, we established our own academy. Now, the academy was to teach nationals to be operators in the oil fields. Now, the challenge was that these nationals, they're school dropouts, basically. They don't have high school degrees. They don't speak English, and they don't have no at all interest in mathematics and physics. So we took them, we recruited them, 2.5 years in blending type of education between all this and on-job, off-job training. After 2.5 years, we have successful technicians. There are about 120 of them right now. They're managing oil fields, different fields, maintenance, safety, production, and those are successful. And it's the early type of micro-credential, I can call it. In that case, yes, I agree with you that we have to have the people like this who have cross between academy and the experience. Now, I'm personally relying on Mark to put the standard because I'm a product of a standard. In oil business, we have to have a standard. We cannot work without standardization. Why? Because it's cheaper, it's easier to relate, and it's quicker, faster solution. Now, what I have an observation with due respect to what Dr. Jihad have mentioned. What if during this epidemic period of time, we have micro-credentials scientists who say, well, we have vaccination, go and try it, without going through the protocol of experimenting first, second, and third, and fourth? What if we have nurses who have micro-credentials? What will happen? What do we have doctors if we have micro-credentials? So there's certain things we have to believe in life. It takes its own time. Yes, we are driven by having opportunity to employ people. This I understand the pressure we have. We have kids who have no jobs, being out of school for 2-3 years, and we have a industry who say we need a specific solution immediately to be workable and good for me to make profits. Basically, we are profit-driven society today and age. That's what's happening. We need faster things, more efficient, cheaper, standardized. Yes, we are doing, but on the same time, there's certain things we cannot accelerate in life. This is a life. We're not talking about today's age, this year. We are teaching kids for future jobs, which we don't know. Today, we are facing with micro-credentials. I'm sure 100 years ago, when they have a pandemic, the Spanish flu, 1918, they never believed that we'll have it again in 2020. The only thing we can say, what we learn from that, how things are changed. Is it changed or not? I don't know. The only thing I can say, human is a human. We have to take his time. Yes, we have to have basic knowledge, basic information, and let their potential and imagination, which no machine can substitute that, do the rest of the job. Give them a time to aspire, to breathe, in other words, to fulfill their potential, to fulfill their imagination, to fulfill their time. We should not subcombat this old mind by giving information, and that's it, to have a job and go through it. Otherwise, we have soldiers of robots. Thank you.
Thank you, Sultan. And you gave us an excellent introduction to the second poll. So,
Marko, can I just have one comment before we go to the second poll?
Yes, please.
Again, it looks like we get back to the Chris comment, which is the definitions. And to also what Roland says about we don't understand it. A micro-credential does not mean that you will jump to a job tomorrow. If somebody is interested to be a surgeon, can go and get a micro-credential and do it. This is a whole thing of prerequisites and knowledge and understanding to get to a certain point. This is exactly what we refer to as stackability. Okay, so micro-credentialing, the value add of it will be, it will actually provide a multiple exit pathway during your planning. So if you want to be a surgeon, you have to spend the 7 years, okay, to be a surgeon, for example, or a graduate. However, okay, if you decided to be a nurse, for example, maybe after the 3rd year, you could do this. Today, it might not be possible. So a micro-credential does not mean that you can jump into a specific career and go and learn that particular piece and come out. It doesn't work like this. So back to, in order for us to be all on the same page, that definition concept, that standardization concept has to be there, okay, in order for you to be, okay, on a spot. If you are, for example, on an oil field, on a rig, for example, and you have a pump somewhere, okay, you cannot just go and learn the pumps, okay, as a standalone without actually knowing enough knowledge in math, for example, and what is the physical principle of operation of those pumps. You have to have those as well. So those, they have prerequisites. So offering a micro-credential is actually is like you are dividing your 1 degree into many small degrees. Each one of it is dependent on how much you can do with that. Okay, so a micro-credential does not deprive or does not mean by any means, the way at least I understand it, to, let's say, ease or lose the restrictions or the qualifications required on someone with the skill of how to do things, how to do something. It's more of moving from a knowledge-based outcomes to skill and competency-based outcomes in a skeleton called micro-credentials.
Sometimes it's helpful to think of the micro-credential as a recognition of something. And that something, of course, is that you have demonstrated, usually through a very rigorous assessment, that you have mastered a particular competency or completed a skill. But so the importance of assessment is something I'd like to put on the table for the group at some point, because that is the ultimate arbiter of all of this discussion.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you all. Now I would like to shift with the second poll, the perspective to a customer or user. So here is the second poll. As all of you used to study, and a lot of you have children studying, I would really like to see now from you, what do you think that, what would bring the most of the value for the next generation learning service users? Please vote. Okay, just a few more seconds. Okay, so here are the results. Most of you responded that the most of the value will bring the flexibility, enabling seamless career development or career shift. And this reflects most of the discussions actually we had in a previous step. And this is something what was basically one of the key drivers of micro-credentials popping up at the market. So now I would like to hear from Jihad, Chris, and Roland from the customer's perspective, how more agility at universities may attract learners and provide them with real value for money. So Jihad.
Thank you, Marko. Now, it seems that in a lot of times when you read about the higher education industry, okay, one of the key things that comes to the standard search engines is the debts that the Western world is struggling with, particularly on the side of the students. And I do understand that, okay, in order for us to create a well-rounded graduate or a profile, we end up pushing 130, 140 credits, for example, over a 4-year program for a certain graduate. Now, that might no longer be needed in the sense of the non-flexibility and data duration and the specific requirements. I would believe the micro-credentials will bring in, okay, a shorter pathways, a lesser cost, okay, and a more affordable, so value for money from those credentials in order to attain a specific skill or a specific requirement will be definitely a value add for the learner in going through to acquire more or less at the end of the period, whatever you're supposed to be achieving if you stayed the 4-year program, for example, as a standard in a given institution. The other value add is actually the cross-institution collaboration. If you are with those available to actually acquire your knowledge and your skills from different institutions and experience different institutions, that would also add more value to the learner and be able to acquire, okay, the requirements. Instead of one size fits all kind of approach of delivering a particular skill, okay, you will have the ability to do it in your own way. In other words, the personalization of the approach and the adaptive learning technology tools, for example, that could be utilized. All these tools, okay, bring a strong value proposition from a micro-credentialing approach to the learner, okay? Nonetheless, this whole thing would be dependent on the specific skills that the industry would require. But all in all, I believe it will bring a real value for money for the learner going that approach to achieve a specific career pathway.
Thank you, Jihad. Chris?
Yeah, thank you. It was an interesting poll, and some of the options of what is value, and we talk about that it's a record of attainment, or whether it's stackability, or whether it's interoperability, and I was sort of not surprised that they weren't chosen as the preference. I think the value, underlying value in micro-credentials is trust. Because micro-credentials are new to the market, they're subject to innovation, they're subject to change, they're subject to interpretation. A university and a provider must establish trust in order to be successful in attracting learners. Trust needs to be the primary design criteria for a micro-credential model. So right now, in my own sector, we don't have national accreditation and we don't necessarily have standards. So we rely on our university's brand and our status in order to establish that trust. Now that works, we know that works across the sector with vendor certifications. So for instance, Microsoft certifications and Cisco certifications rely on the trust that we provide in those brands. So universities need to really work hard to establish trust with students and trust with employers. And how do we do that? Well, I think one of the best ways is that universities need to work with industry to create the micro-credentials, to co-develop, to co-create, to ensure that we can demonstrate that the micro-credentials have inherent relevance to industry and to outcomes, and having the companies or prominent individuals endorse the courses. That builds that trust. We also need to establish trust through having our university QA processes prominent in these micro-credentials, not treating them as simple little short courses that can be done which provide small value. They need to be regarded as almost as equal as our standard credentialed courses, and providing good student experience and good student outcomes. One of the things that we do at Swinburne in order to help establish trust is that we explain much of what the students have attained on the certificate. So the industry linkages, the quality assurance, the depth of the learning, the volume of the learning, the capabilities achieved need to be put onto the certificate. And then we need to distribute the certificate in a robust sort of credentialing system so that it's more than just a piece of paper, that the certificate itself can be trusted, trusted that it's from a reputable source, and that it certifies the capabilities of the learner, and that the learner is the learner that's been certified. So at Swinburne, we've looked at secure platforms, including a blockchain platform that allows the distribution of these trusted certificates, which have that information that I think employers are seeking to be able to verify that students have got the capabilities that they're claiming when they show that certificate.
Thank you. Roland.
Yeah, thanks. So, I mean, there are lots of customers, of course, and students and employers are some of them. I'll just tell you a short story about something that we do at PwC. Globally, we've developed an AI-driven tool that is able to extract information from all the jobs available in a particular country. So I can look at every single job in the UAE, and I can then apply to that the census data that fundamentally underlies the demographics of the country. I can apply some learning around what jobs are going to be automated, what are going to be more remotable, and which therefore are under threat in the future and might have changing skills needs. And I can develop a really clear picture of industry by industry, level by level, what skills are required right now and in the future for the workplace, which is a phenomenal achievement of technology that we didn't previously have, because employers aren't very good at saying what kind of skills they need now or ever. What I then need to do is match that with my students, so that I can say, right, I've got my student now, and I've got this fantastic information about the workplace. How do the two match? Now, if you plug a student's CV into that fancy machine, it's not going to do very much, except say bad fit, because all it's got on there is a partial degree, which doesn't tell us much about the student's real capabilities. It doesn't tell us very much about what they've learned. It doesn't tell us much about what they've actually succeeded in or what they're very good at. So if I can break that down into a sequence of really much more a granular level of detail about this individual, and I trust that source, I can do a much better job of matching that data with the job requirements that are in the market today or in the future. And I can tell HCT or any of the other universities that are here, well, you know what, funnily enough, there's a bit of a mismatch here. We might want to adjust some of these programs to give these skills a slightly different flavor for the future, which is great, but we can't quite yet have a CV that's well structured enough to feed in that layer. And that's because we don't have the ability to put all that data down in one place, and we don't have the trust in the credentials that underlie a single name degree. So I think here, what I'm saying is the agility that universities will have in the future is to much better match the skills of their graduates with the needs of the labor market, employers will be much better able to understand those graduates as they come out. And as you go through life and the jobs change very quickly, we're going to be much better able to match people's employment pathways with the skills that they have now or should have in the future to succeed in wherever they are either going to or have to pivot towards. So I think that's one part of agility. I think the other part of agility for universities might be that actually we don't necessarily need to be talking just about micro-credentials. There are other things that universities might need to be agile around, and that's around innovation. Innovation and entrepreneurship, perhaps, for students coming out, which doesn't look the same as a degree. It actually may not suit all students or all graduates to have a degree or a set of credentials that add up to a degree. It may be that we need to help them understand a different career path around invention, innovation, commercialization of ideas that they can work on in a university environment, and link that to employers or to investors to grow an idea. And that's not necessarily a credential related activity, but it could well be the way that universities start to think about their role in putting young people out into the world successfully. So I think two types of agility there for universities.
Thank you, Roland. You have given actually an excellent intro to the next question. And really, I'm an advocate that all learning should matter. Of course, that authenticity of the learning and the assessment of the learning achievement is important. But I would like to hear now how some panelists are seeing next generation services may contribute to better communication and interoperability between learners, education providers, and employers, having in mind that it's not only about the formal learning. So we have to think about non-formal and informal learning as well. So Mark, floor is yours.
Thank you. And Roland, I cannot wait to have a one-on-one with you and actually everyone to share the standards that IMS has been working on to allow for certain of the vision that you've put forward. So I'm thrilled to hear your recognition of that important need. The services that we believe will be emerging as a tremendous market opportunity involve this collaboration capability that we're implicitly discussing, and that is how can an education provider stay aware of what the relevant skills are in their industry or in their particular employer partners that they may have a relationship with. So services that can be based upon open standards that allow for the easy communication of skills and curriculum together, so that educators can quickly see what the skill demand is, and employers can readily see what is available through a curriculum, and that they potentially could collaborate on the development of assessments. We're actually running a project right now that demonstrates this capability, and one of the more controversial aspects of the project involve employers and the educators sitting down to develop assessment, because historically the role of education and the academy up through what the assessment actually entails has been protected fiercely by the academics, and it puts, sometimes they feel that they don't want to be, I'll say, subservient to employers, and that they're not educating these students strictly for employment. And so this need to be independent has developed in a culture of inward looking. And so that's kind of an aside, but it actually plays a role in the ability to perform effective outreach and effective partnering. But once we're beyond the cultural and the aspects of these barriers, the technology that will allow for what is commonly thought of as a business-to-business kind of relationship, a B2B process, where we can seamlessly exchange information across these domains and even develop, co-develop your education programs, co-develop the assessments that will evaluate whether that learner actually does understand the particular subject. And so the trust is baked in to the fact that the experts mutually developed it. So that's one kind of service, the horizontal sharing of common set of goals and objectives at scale. And another is this concept that we've talked about of assessment. The whole question of trust is related to the rigor and the relevance and the quality of the product, the program, the offering. And it's my thinking that this is really, and this is very common issue, or at least a pervasive issue as well in the United States, that this represents an accreditation challenge. At the end of the day, the quality of programs rests with the accrediting organizations that are issuing the licenses for these schools. And I believe that they will increasingly have a stake in the processes that the schools are undergoing to do what's called backward design, which builds their programs based on the expected outcomes. Again, outcomes mutually agreed with industry, let's say. And I don't think we should let the accreditors off the hook as far as their role in ensuring that when they have provided a license to an institution, that it's done so based on a very rigorous evaluation and very, very high standards of performance. So I'll leave that.
Thank you, Mark. And really, this communication between two worlds, education and employment, is so important. And Sultan already had some comments on it. I would just like to add that as a learner, commonly I have some values I believe I possess, even if those are not authenticated. So self-reflection should be very important. And whoever worked in HR sector would, of course, rely very much on interview to drill deeper to see what is your value beyond the degrees or micro-credentials you possess. So Sultan, can you just reflect on this, please?
Thank you, Mark. I think there's one thing came up to my mind right now, listening to you and to Mark. We don't know what we don't know. The challenge is that as an employer, we have a plan for 10 years and beyond that. And we need people who can replace people who are there to do the same thing and even faster and better and cheaper, in other words. So that's why the micro-credential could help in a way to do this. Now, the challenge for the education part is that, but there's a lack, as Mark have said, between the employer and the academia. And that has been there for a very long time. It's true in Abu Dhabi, true somewhere else. I think this is the problem we have. And there should be some kind of consolidation, some kind of integration between both industries. So because end of the day, the academia providing employees for the industry, our entrepreneurs, in other words, as Roland have said. So how to do this? I think there's no magic answers except what Professor Chris have said, to build a trust. To build a trust, because this is the basic question which we have. We are not trusting the credentials coming out of the school today are doing the job we need to do. Okay, now to do it today, and most important, Roland have said twice this, we have to have the potentials of the people, not only to do the job today, but are they able to do the job after 5 to 10 years? Where Jihad's question comes that the credentials, take it at your own pace and your own time. It's a lifelong learning. I think for me, to go to the basics, yes, fantastic. That's what Mark is doing. We need the standard in this issue, but most importantly, we need a dialogue, an honest, trustworthy dialogue between the industry and academia. I'm going up to point that to say with you what you have to say, Marko, that's maybe an idea that the HR function and the recruitment, training, assessment should be handled by a college or by university in the industry. So this we have flow of information and a flow of continuous relation between both industries. You know, I mean, like we do a lot of outsourcing services in our industry and our jobs and things. We can outsource this to the provider, the future provider, I can call it. Maybe that's an idea. We should think about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that one. And this actually rolls us to the last question before we shift to questions and answers from audience. As we are a little bit behind the schedule, I would just like to ask you all to reflect to the last question as concise as you can. So how do you see the future of higher education in 10 years from today in light of the impact next generation services may and will bring? Let's start from Roland.
Thanks, Marko. I love trying to predict the future because no one ever holds you accountable. Although, funnily enough, I answered a similar question last year, when by the time we were halfway through COVID, most of the predictions of what was going to happen in about 7 or 8 years' time had already happened. So what will be 10 years from today? I think we will have an education that is fully flexible, that's fully portable, that is fully evidenced, that is fully customized for the individual, that is fully integrated with employers, and that the employers and the workplace will interact with higher education as a hub for innovation as well as education.
Thank you, Roland. Sultan.
I think I totally agree with Roland that it will be some kind that, let's go back to the basics. Human is a human and there's certain needs, today, tomorrow, after tomorrow. I think these needs will be satisfied, whatever. Now, at what degree, at what pace, this is the thing. The education will channel that to give people the most comfortable life, happier life, whether it's an environment, whether it's an industry, whether it's, so I think the education will cater to do that for human being, to give us maybe cars without, I mean, the oil industry will be less important in about 25 years from now. It will be less and less. The renewable energy will be more. So we have a lot of students, education going through that industry. Maybe one thing which we have not asked, the millennial, those are the core principal reason what we're talking about. The General X, what they want, how they're living their lives. They want, work-life balance. That's what they motivate them. And if we cater to that, we will get the best out of them, really. We talk about what we know, what we as an employer we need, as an industry what we need. But somebody has to ask, what are the millennials will react and act and behave and needs? Basically, what they will be needs. Because my observation, I don't know if my colleagues agree with me, more and more the millennials are not loyal to anybody. I mean, I think maybe Chris, maybe Mark or Roland have mentioned that the span of changing, I mean, Roland has a span of changing jobs in 5 years will be 17 times. I mean, it's a huge. So when they will have enough time to acquire an experience and expertise, which we need, I mean, in my industry, we need expertise. Maybe, I don't know. I mean, this is a question I would leave it to the floor, but I think things will change if it's fast, rapid. My focus will be generation X or Z or Alpha. Today we can do Alpha. What are their needs are really? That's what will be a question on Earth.
Thank you, Sultan. Mark. Mark, please unmute yourself.
Sorry about that. Thank you. Increasingly, we will focus on skills, and those skills represented in digital credentials held by a learner, and that therefore will empower that learner in ways that we don't yet understand. So power will shift to the learner themselves, not the institutions. So the skills-based credentials will be a tremendous currency to really democratize not only education but the entire education workforce society and marketplace, which ultimately will lead to greater equity.
Thank you, Mark. Very concise. Chris.
Yeah, thank you. Look, it's very interesting to think that we're going to look forward to 5 to 10 to 15 years from now. Just reflecting over the past 6 months that how we rapidly shifted a whole university's operations from being a campus-based operation to online learning in a matter of 2 weeks, that we turned 50,000 students across 800 subjects to online learning. And we're doing it so well at the moment, and the student feedback is terrific. We did that quickly, and I think that's given us the confidence to really go further, to go harder, to go faster with our digital transformation. So I'm really looking forward to the next 5, 10, 15 years. What I see is, I think blended learning is here to stay. So we will see students being able to flex between their virtual learning and their in-class learning as their needs change, and really blending learning with life, to Sultan's point. I think universities will become more clever with the use of analytics to personalised learning. So we'll leverage data from our learning management system and other systems to really improve that student engagement, the retention and the learning outcomes, to go for that personalisation. Today's topic around micro-credentials, that modularisation and the disaggregation of the longer degrees into tailored offerings that really do suit the needs of students at particular times in their lives. And I also see sort of rapid updates to curriculum, because as digital transformation happens throughout our economy, the need for up-to-date skills and capabilities will be there. So universities will need real-time curriculum revisions really to meet the market needs. So it's going to be quite an exciting time. The however, though, is that I'm also excited about what we can do with our campus experiences. So I think campus life goes to what Sultan's point is. We don't want to move away just simply to having students aggregate skills. They need that campus experience. We need to understand what that campus experience will be like in 5 years' time. It won't be as it was 2 years ago. We'll probably have shorter and higher value experiences. We'll pay attention to learning spaces, and that the merging between the virtual and the on-campus needs to happen on campus. So it's going to be an exciting time.
Thank you, Chris. Jihad.
I probably would put it in a very concise statement, and I believe in the coming few years, I believe the business model for the higher education institutions will be skill on demand approach. Okay, now, so we will offer the skill as a higher academic institution. Nonetheless, in order for the institutions to be successful in that and be able to deliver that, while we're mentioning the issues of accreditation, the mentioning of the importance of a campus life, the mentioning of a well-rounded students, building an ecosystem around such approach would be the challenge for the academic institutions to build. Nonetheless, the bigger concept will be a skill on demand approach for learners. I want a skill, I'll go and grab it regardless of what are the requirements to be qualified for that skill. The challenge for the academic institutions will be how to build an ecosystem around it to make sure that you are successful in this approach, given the fact that technology pressure will not let you off the hook, because on the other side, the employer requirements will be as dynamically changing as the technology itself. And this is where of the bigger pressure that will come on the institution. But at the same time, as I said earlier, and I do correlate 100% with Sultan and the other team, that we should never forget the human side of the story. A lot of students today will tell you when they want to apply for an institution, if it's all online, I don't want you. Because actually the university campus life did bring a whole lot of change to the personality of the learner. If we want to deprive the student from that experience, we're depriving him or her from that well-rounded build-up of a character. It's not just the hard core skills that are demanded. But while we're doing that, okay, and the skill on demand and the micro-credentialing, that ecosystem has to be built. And I would believe that is part of the planning that academic institutions should have in mind now in order to be able to be successful while implementing it, just exactly as we were successful in putting things online in a matter of 2 weeks, because we were planning for it, not for the pandemic case, but we were expecting it. That we made us successful in 2 or 3 weeks' time to go live without any issues. So I believe in a short statement, a skill on demand will be the slogan for the business model of higher education down the road, and the challenge will be to build an ecosystem around it.
Thank you very much all. Now we will shift to questions and answers, and I hope that we can dedicate between 10 to 15 minutes to this. And I will try to go through your questions, modifying them a bit, having in mind that some of those are being already answered. So there is a question at the very beginning. Do you believe there is a lack of teachers skilled to teach? This question was about science and technology, triggered by previous discussion, but I would shift it to what would be the shift of skill set of teachers in order to prepare them to get aligned with the new types of services? Chris, can you give us a little bit of reflection?
That's an interesting question, and I think, Marko, your take on it really provides a challenge. How do we, I think, build the teaching workforce to be able to address this? One initiative that's happening locally in my state and the state government in Australia is looking at how we can create a different type of teaching workforce with greater diversity. It's to bring teachers in who have had life experience, in different careers, who can then give back through teaching. And in order to do that, we've created essentially an apprenticeship-based model so that the learner, the student teacher, can actually be part of the education institution, earning an income whilst they learn how to be a teacher, but then I think contributing to the teaching effort in a school. We need diversity in teachers that can really draw on life experience, that they can understand where science and technology, but also other aspects of life are so important. I think one of our problems, particularly in my country, is the homogeneity of teachers. They come directly out of secondary school, they do a teaching qualification and then move straight on to being teachers. And I think they struggle really to bring a context to what they're teaching that will encourage and I think motivate students to look at science and technology.
Thank you. Jihad, can you add something on this?
Absolutely, Marko. Institutions, a few years back, they were focusing on how to certify their teachers in pedagogy. And they were dealing with, let's say, bodies around the globe, okay, how to make sure that your teacher is equipped with the pedagogy needed, whether it is at the classroom level or at the digital level. I would believe that the role model of a faculty member will change. It will have to change from a teacher into a coach. And the skill set of a coach, okay, to a particular skill actually is very different. And this would be an opportunity for the IMS to take a role into, okay, because to be honest with you, that's part of the areas we looked into it at HCT carefully on where would we bring coach certification for our faculty, not just teaching. Okay, while you know that, for example, the pedagogical tools, okay, it is not available. we were not able to identify a resource that is having that areas. So that is an area, for example, in terms of standardization, the IMS might work on it, okay? But that role, in order to bring the capability of a life, capability of, let's say, a technology environment, capability of a field environment, capability of actual hands-on experience in different areas, the teacher or who is today as a faculty member should have that capability. So in order to meet the requirements, I believe, that is a change that's inevitable for the faculty to be recruited or introduce some sort of reskilling of the faculty members into that role.
Thank you. Next question is for Roland, and it refers about his strong insistence to validate the skills which are acquired by at the universities. So what do you think how the formal experience or formal learning experience or formal education experience can be compared with informal? In this question, it's even mentioned that, for example, playing Call of Duty online at Xbox teaches students how to team play. So how you can reflect on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting point. So I think, you know, there's a question here about why and how do we recognize the skills and competencies that are being trained or being learned? So if you're sitting at home playing Call of Duty, you're probably learning a lot about team play, you're learning a lot about technology, you might be learning some quite good hand-eye coordination and fine motor skills. Does anybody give you recognition for those attributes that you've gained? No, not yet. We don't have the ability to recognize that learning. We don't have the ability to and I don't think anyone going for a job interview would say, don't worry, I've played hours of Call of Duty all night, so I'm pretty fired up for this job, and I think I can do it really well, regardless of the job. So I think that's the point about validation is to say, well, who is going to structure that learning into a format that we can recognize and tell me that as a result of all of the Call of Duty work, this individual now has the following skills. And you can trust me because I'm an organization that's able to tell you that they've met the standard for these skills. So that's what I'm looking for. I believe that the Call of Duty will teach you all sorts of things. What I don't believe is that we're very good at showing those skills yet.
Thank you, Roland. Having in mind that I have previous discussion with Mark regarding the IMS Global standards, Mark, can you reflect a bit on Roland's discussion, having in mind that your standard takes care about verifiable attainments, but also about the students' evidence and self-reflection, and it provides opportunity for curating the records content towards the particular request from the labor market?
Yes, thank you. The Comprehensive Learner Record is a collection of achievements that are issued by an organization or an individual. So the individual can actually do what's called self-assertion and create an achievement record and provide evidence connecting, perhaps it's a video, perhaps a work product itself, or any other evidence. And when he or she collects together the records that they've been issued or created, as we're just now saying, she's able to share that collection of achievements as a unified set in response to a particular opportunity. So she's able to customize in that respect the credentials that she presents for a particular position, or even for advancement through higher education. So it's very flexible in that respect, and yet still verifiable. That each of the elements that was officially issued by a third party are digitally verifiable. And then, of course, when I'm self-asserting, your judgment as to whether or not I've demonstrated the minimum requirements to meet your needs, of course, that's still the greatest to the greatest effect.
Thank you. I would try to also put together some of the other questions and ask Sultan, as he has a vast experience in HR sector. So if you have a candidate who approaches you presenting his capability towards the requirement of the certain job by verifiable credentials, which are stackable or not, but which are defined well to express what is the competence set they're claiming, with the evidence which goes along, linked with the achievements, proving that even if you are talking about the provider which may be, let's say, questionable, there is an evidence proving to you as an employer that there is a kind of substance, there is a critical mass of student effort to prove this. And if there is a self-reflection of the learner which claims his confidence or her confidence that he or her is ready for the job, how would you react at this point?
I think I will go with my colleague Roland have said previously. I will not be discriminative, in other words. Most important is the human being in front of you today, and you interview him and you assess his potential and his competencies. That's what's important. Now, whether he came very humble background or humble university for whatever circumstances he has, that's none of my concern really. I'll give a chance to anybody can prove themselves and their competencies, because I don't think all of us are product of certain level of certain background. We came a product of different backgrounds, different varieties, diverse competencies, but in the day we could be able to deliver. That's what makes us success. Successful means I can deliver what I know, what I have experienced, not where I got it from. So this is my humble response. Yes, and I tell you, we have expertise who have no credentials, but they have well-known records. I mean, we had an Indian from a reserve from Idaho came and performed certain expertise in our fields, and this person have no certificate to show us, but have records of proven, credential that he can do the job, and he did it. So that's where he came from. For me, with due respect to all Ivy Leagues and all the universities, they're doing a fantastic job, and I'm sure to be having a certificate from one of the best schools is fantastic. If you can, go for it. But as an employer, I accept him as much as I accept anybody else's from any other backgrounds.
Thank you. I would add also the question, the answer to the question related with recognition of prior learning. From my point of view, that could be addressed to higher education institutions, but also to employers directly. So it depends on the particular situation. If you are, as a candidate, trying to reach a degree and you have a vast experience in a certain area and you can prove it, you have a justification, of course there are ways to prove it at the academic level and to get a higher level of qualification from the accredited institution. But from the other side, this same experience can be presented to the employer directly, and sometimes employer would validate it even more than a degree itself. That's why I think that comprehensive learner record is very important concept. It has been evolved even now through some of the think tanks, global think tanks like T3 Innovation Network, to learning and employment records. This is a new term which is getting more strength even over the comprehensive learner record. So getting together experience from the learning sector and from the employment sector in order to show the full competence a certain person may have or may provide to the employer at the point when this person applies for a job. One more question which we can answer to. What do you think about educational institutions having tie-ups with business organizations? So I would throw this to Dr. Jihad, and with this question, which he particularly answered in a certain way, I would close this section of the panel. So Dr. Jihad, can you please emphasize once more about the balance of tying education with employers and how learners can change their role?
Yes, Marko, thank you. I just probably, as I said, okay, the equation is very complex today. Okay, and in terms of a totally new business model for higher education. And in that sense, okay, I would expect that the equation will be flipped between what's happening today, in the sense of a lot of emphasis is taking place on the interaction between industry and higher education, and how the higher education is aligning their program and curriculum to the industry requirements. However, okay, we know that was doable and able to do in previous times, because the pace of change of the industry was almost comparable to how long would it take to change things at the academic level. Now, the changes are so unprecedentedly changing fast at the industry level that academics cannot cope. And by the time, if you want to take the academic cycle change, the whole requirements of the industry is changing. So that model has to change. And I would expect it, okay, instead of, okay, industry academic fulfilling the requirements, it is more now of learner industry interaction to learn for the learner to understand what is the requirements and go and seek the skills required from the industry as dynamically as possible, okay, to which institution is offering that. And that's where inter-institution collaboration becomes necessary, okay, because if it's not offered here, it's offered there. You want to put them together now to make sure that you meet the requirements needed by the industry, okay? So that is where I would expect to seeing it coming together. That will also play a tremendous role on the comprehensive learner's record. So when you do now today build a comprehensive learner record, what would happen actually, I would expect that employers will have access, okay, to the employer's record in any institution. And they will go actually and do a search at the institution level of which of their students have the specific skills that is needed by the industry. And the industry will go directly and interact with them, with the potential candidate, with the potential student who's acquiring those skills. So that game is changing. And I would expect that is the role, will be more of a learner industry interaction, much more than an academic institution industry interaction.
Thank you. I would allow just one more question, as Chris indicated that he would like to answer to this. So what do you think is needed to bring the institutions, and in this case, Australian government, together to approve micro-credentials framework that could apply to all of the national systems? So Chris, please.
Well, speaking as a university administrator, funding would drive behaviour. Students are driven by, to some degree, by funding and the availability of courses at a reasonable rate. And so if there was government funding and recognition of micro-credentials, I believe, to the same degree that they give funding for undergraduate qualifications, I believe that would bring universities together very quickly to work out how best to serve that particular market. At the moment, it's a competitive market that universities and other education providers are all jumping into quickly in order to, I think, try to address opportunities. So it's not necessarily coordinated, and I don't think universities and providers are probably on the same page. So it's unfortunate to say, but funding sometimes drives behaviours here, both for students, employers, and for universities.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we close this section with money or lack of money or whatever. Anyhow, dear panelists, dear audience, thank you very much. I would really like to thank for very insightful session, and I believe that discussion helped us all to understand the current trends as well as potential directions where higher education may move in the near future. On behalf of the higher colleges of technology, I would like to invite you to follow our announcements and join our next Future Readiness webinars. Have a great day, and thank you once more.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you, guys. All the best.
Thanks, everyone. That was great. Really enjoyed it.
Bye all.
Bye.
Thank you, guys. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Marko.